Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I am here with Jonathon, and today we are going to talk about the recent series, Centenary series, between the All Whites and the Socceroos from this last week. Uh, Jonathan, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So we had two games, two very, I hesitate to say important games because New Zealand aren't, we didn't make it through to the World Cup, but Australia did. So not so much important for us in that regard, but important in that we got to see some of our best talent playing at home, like Winston Reid playing at home, Chris Wood, Libby, who's been playing over in Europe. Yeah, a whole bunch of guys that, and then we even got to see some of our own. Nick, Ollie Payne was there. So I think from that regard, it was fantastic for the audience. Two good games of football. It did appear like the All Whites were a little bit lacking, or they may have been a bit exhausted after the quick turnaround coming back to Eden Park. But yeah, what did you think, Blake? How did you enjoy it?
Well, the first game was in Brisbane, and I thought they played really well in Brisbane.
Yeah.
A lot better than they would later on, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, the I was surprised with it being Winston Reid last series that they left him mostly out of the Brisbane game. I get that they wanted a big send off to be at Auckland, but I think we could have really used him in that first game, to be honest. And because we just seemed we seemed so much better. And I don't know how this is going to adjust now that it's gone. But we seem so much better defensively with him actually in there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I felt that a lot of that was sort of missing in the first game when he wasn't there. Would you tend to agree?
Yeah, I mean, Winston's. He's been around a long time. He's played a lot of top flight football, and he just brings that calm, calm sense of mind. He knows how to play tough. He knows how to defend and tackle well without giving away too many yellows. And you're right, we don't quite have. I'm not sure we have that same amount of depth at the moment. I mean, there are a lot of players around, but whether they're of the same caliber or excellence as Winston is yet to be seen. And so his retirement leaves a big hole in that back line.
And don't get me wrong, they played very well without him, but I just noticed that extra step wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just brings and he just brings that little bit of extra. That's the X factor. That someone of that caliber brings. That we just, I'm not sure we quite have it in other players at the moment, but hopefully, it'll come through because there's other guys. We've got Nico Boxall, who's quietly making his way up. Nico Kerwin, I think Nico Kerwin's bloody cool. Is a little bit still on the young side. He'll come. Libby's around. Kind of that. Like a defensive mid. We'll see. But yeah, what do you think of the second game?
The second game was great. A lot more physical than the first one. And we could see that by Chris Wood getting his injury early on, and Ben Wayne having to fill the big shoes. Isn't it great having to see young Wellington prodigy having to fill those big shoes on a stage? That was just quite good to see.
Oh yeah, I mean going from being playing schoolboy football in Wellington to at the same time that Woodsy was over playing top flight football in England, and then hello Ben Wayne, step up, you're it mate, you're centre forward, you're striking now, you're stepping in. That's pretty big. I'm just can't even imagine how much of a great feeling that must have felt for him, getting that opportunity.
And yeah, but hopefully then the international side for years to come. So going back to our social media presence a little bit, we had the little corner of yellow come to when they were at the game in Brisbane. So our friends on the pod,
Mm.
the little corner of the yellow, were in Brisbane, and there was a quite an interesting story that I wanted to share how they got there, but it's still related to the game. So they're so dedicated to the game that they drove, 10 hours to get there?
Yeah, something crazy like that, like 800. Yeah, so what happened? Yeah, their flight to Brisbane was cancelled, and then Holly and her mate were like, "Well, we've got tickets. We've got nothing else to do today." So they jumped in the car and drove 875 kilometres up to Brisbane to go to the game, which is absolutely extraordinary.
So I'd just like to take a moment to thank Holly and her mates for their commitment not only to domestic football but to international football.
Yes.
Just a bit of related thing there to just fill in.
Yeah, I get a big round of applause.
What would you like to see for? There's a lot of conjecture around, a lot of talk around Danny Hay leaving the coaching job. Do you reckon it's valid, or do you agree with Chris Wood that he should stay?
I think there's more to the story. Like it's a bit like what happened with, excuse me for referring to a different coach, but what's been happening with Ian Foster, and the media jumped in and started talking about employment stuff and contracts because it sells stories. But, New Zealand football have a due process to follow, and Danny Hay will know what that is. And, I've got no issue with Chris Wood coming out going, yep, we need, re-sign him and getting behind him. No issue with that at all. And I do think New Zealand do need to retain Danny Hay. I think he's a fantastic coach. But at the same time, we do need to, New Zealand football do have a process to work through. There's employment law, there's contract law. So I did think it was a bit premature of the media to be jumping in on that story. I think there's more to be played out, and I'd like to see how that goes before we make, yeah.
And there's a lot of, they're quick to jump and say, oh, hey, the players are quick to say, oh, we wanted to stay. But, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, Chris Wood. I'm sorry, Dan Wayne. I'm sorry, whoever. It's not your choice. You'd like them to stay, but we can't always. The players need to understand too that they can't always have what they want. And they coach, but they don't have any say really.
Yeah, and I mean, and the other side to that is that the media, some of the people in the media do take advantage of those opportunities. They got the players in front of them, so the media want to write stories. So here's a story. Hey, Danny, hey, what are you doing with your contract? So, and those are the very small snippets that actually get shown on TV or in the news, whereas those often are very small parts of a much bigger press conference. But that's what we get shown. But you're totally right, Blake. The players don't necessarily get to decide, but I'm all for them sharing their voice because
Me too,
especially someone of Chris Wood's stature.
Yeah. Because he's been in the UK, but anyway, in closing for this chat, how would you what kind of because there's a lot of talk about going into the wilderness. So what would you like to see for the future of international competition for our Always?
A whole nother podcast series and interesting discussion is around what level of play that All Whites should be in. Should we stay in Oceania or should we switch over to Asia and then be having more fixtures with Australia and those higher teams? I don't know. I don't think our boys get tested enough against we get an easier run supposedly into the World Cup by being in Oceania. We do need harder games if we're going to see the team go on and achieve better things. But in the short term, maybe even a short tour to South America would be pretty cool because, there are teams who are going to World Cup who'll be looking for friendly fixtures. So my personal preference, and this is just me just talking straight off the top of my head, is South America would be fantastic. If we could play a Paraguay or a Mexico or some of those teams because, our ladies recently played Mexico. So that would be my preference. What about you, Blake?
Yeah, I'd like to see in the short term just more international games in general rather than the odd 500, 400 between games.
Mm.
But that's a whole nother conversation for another time. If you do want to see a more in-depth episode on what we think the future of the All White, let us know down below or on our whole lot of new social media. So we've got Facebook by the lockdown next. Hang on. No, it's gone. Never mind.
We're on Facebook. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Oh, and we've also got a LinkedIn. So we're kind of everywhere. We're taking over the world.
So yeah, but in a future episode we'll get those proper names for you.
Cool.
So we'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and we'll see you then.
Cool. Thanks, Blake.